The field of temporary workers has become commonplace to satisfy shortages of nurses and other service professionals to fill gaps to ensure healthcare delivery. Doctors, too, are increasingly being called on in this role, known as locum tenens, and the numbers may surprise you. You're listening to ReachMD Radio on XM 160, the channel for medical professionals. I'm Bruce Japsen, the healthcare reporter with the Chicago Tribune, and joining me today is Jenni Hunter. Ms. Hunter is the Divisional Vice President for Staff Care, the largest locum tenens staffing company in the United States. She has over a decade of experience at locum tenens staffing experience and is a regular contributor to Advance for Radiology Administrators and other medical practice management publications. Staff Care is a Merritt Hawkins company and the nation's largest placement organization for temporary physician services. We're so glad to have her today. She joins us from her offices in Dallas, Texas. Jenni Hunter, welcome to ReachMD Radio on XM 160, the channel for medical professionals.
Thank you, Bruce.
Well, it's great to have you here. So tell us a little bit about, for our listeners who do not know, the whole idea behind locum tenens and sort of how that's evolved, and then we can talk about what some health facilities might be experiencing as a crisis.
Absolutely. Locum tenens is actually a Latin term, loosely, to hold a place. And it's been going on for, really forever. A local doctor has a friend or colleague that fills in for them. It's only since roughly around the mid-'70s that it turned into more of an industry, and over the past 30 to 40 years has actually grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry.
And so is the whole idea that, does this go on in just rural areas or urban areas where there might be staffing issues, or where are you seeing this now?
Actually, it's all over. We have a large number of rural facilities that do need help, but we have just as many that are in large metropolitan areas in all 50 states.
Now, I know that Staff Care had a survey this fall that indicated over 70% of healthcare facilities have used temporary doctors in the last 12 months. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and is that on the rise? I mean, that 70% of, you think about 70% of the nation's hospitals, there's 5,000 hospitals, that is a huge number of people.
Absolutely, and it is. Every facility that, whether it be, primary care, your IM subspecialties, diagnostics, there's a shortage of physicians. And they are turning to locum tenens to be able to fill their gaps. And again, that's in all settings, whether it be a clinic or a 500-plus bed hospital.
And tell me, what kind of disciplines are the most common that hospitals need? Is it across the board? It would seem to me, when we talk about President Obama, Congress, it seems that there's a shortage of family physicians in primary care, so that might be kind of obvious. But is that generally what you're seeing? Is it moving into other areas?
I would say that absolutely the largest demand that we see is going to be in the IM subspecialties, family practice, more of your general practitioner. However, we work in all specialties in all 50 states, anywhere from surgical specialties to diagnostics, behavioral health, dentistry. It's really any specialty that's out there where there is a shortage. Locum tenens has been a viable resource for facilities.
Now, and the kinds of doctors that Staff Care might sign on, do they tend to be younger? Do they tend to be folks that work part-time? What kind of folks go into this line of work? Because it almost seems, if you're a physician, it might even be attractive because you might be able to set your own hours.
Absolutely. I think that the reason that most physicians have decided on this type of lifestyle is for the freedom and flexibility that it offers. Many times someone that's coming out of residency doesn't really know where they want to end up or exactly what they want to do, and they choose locum tenens. We also have a large number of physicians that aren't quite ready for retirement, want to keep up their skills, and they've decided to do this part-time and really decide where and when they want to work. And then you also have a large number that has decided to do locum tenens on a full-time basis. That, this moonlighting, as you may call it, they've decided that really all they want to do is practice medicine. They don't want to have to worry about trying to collect reimbursements and paperwork and things that may go with it. They really just want to be able to practice medicine, and this is a perfect way for them to do it.
So does Staff Care pay their malpractice? Do they handle the billing? How does that work?
Usually the facility or the practice is going to handle the billing for reimbursements. So the physician doesn't have to do that. Staff care does handle malpractice as well as all travel. Any logistical aspect of getting a physician from point A to point B, staff care takes care of. So again, the physician really doesn't have to worry about any of the logistics of being on assignment. They only have to worry about getting there and practicing medicine, which is what they want to do.
Now, as someone who's written about healthcare a long time, in the nurse situation, I know when there were nurse shortages and they hired staffing companies, sometimes consumers worry about the quality of care. What does staff care do to ensure that the physicians are of high quality, and I assume they're credentialed and so forth? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. There many specialties are credentialed into the facility. Some, if it's a clinic, possibly not. However, staff care has a quality assurance process that weeds out, makes sure that all physicians are of highest of quality, through references, through making sure that there is no malpractice history, things such as that, to make sure that we've got the top quality physicians that are able to go in and fill a void within one of our facilities or practices.
Well, if you're just joining us, or even if you're new to our channel, you're listening to ReachMD Radio on XM 160, the channel for medical professionals. I'm Bruce Japsen, your host. I'm with the Chicago Tribune, and joining me today from Staff Care is a Locum Tenens company, a staffing company for physicians, Jenni Hunter. She's a divisional vice president, and we're talking about what has become a crisis in this country. Hospitals, health facilities, they need primary care physicians. They're starting to run out. They turn to staffing companies. And if I could ask you, Jenni, how does this figure into healthcare reform? I mean, is this something that staff care could play a role into as far as placing physicians, or if all of a sudden there's reimbursement available? How does that work?
Absolutely. I think that, as we look at what the possibilities are, we're looking at, regardless of how it all turns out, I think that we're looking at being able to offer more individuals more access, greater access to medical care. And with that being said, there is a physician shortage. We've been training the same number of physicians every year as the population grows. So the shortage of physicians only becomes greater. As I said before, I think that these physicians are seeking alternatives so that they can simply practice medicine. And it's something that they're turning to. And so I do think that Locum Tenens is going to play a huge role, regardless of how healthcare reform turns out over the next several months. What we find out, it is going to play a large role in being able to fill any void that a practice or hospital has.
Now, when you're client companies, if you're hospitals and health facilities, I would think that they would eventually want to get a permanent doctor on board. I mean, is that often something that happens where hospitals, health facilities, medical groups can use a temporary physician as sort of a tryout? Do they do that, or is that something that you see?
Yes, absolutely. And that's actually a growing trend. Being able to have a physician work and find out, is this physician not even just the quality, but is this going to be a great fit for both the physician and the facility? And if so, being able to take that physician on a permanent basis. You've got two different types of physicians, one that is looking, that doesn't quite know where they want to go, who may be looking for a permanent position. And then on the other hand, as I mentioned, that physician that has made this a lifestyle.
I know that Staff Care does a survey of temporary physicians, and they sort of gauge what the physicians are looking for. I mean, what are these younger physicians looking for when they want to be placed in an organization?
They're really looking for flexibility, some freedom, flexibility, wanting to make their own schedules, not wanting to deal with the bureaucracies that come along with being a permanent physician and the politics of being within a facility or practice. And really, I think that everyone, and this goes from the younger physicians all the way to those who are facing retirement, that really just want to practice medicine, and it's become harder and harder to be able to do that.
And do your physicians that you hire to place at facilities, do they tend to be younger doctors?
I would say that it's really a wide range. We do have quite a large number of physicians coming out of residency. that are younger doctors, but we also have just as many that are facing retirement and want to continue practicing. So I would say that kind of the bell curve, that the majority of them are more of your middle age of physicians that are practicing locum tenens.
Now, as a son and a brother and an uncle of nurses, I just remember that when the shortages of nurses hit, this was good for nurses because their pay went up incredibly, because that's just the way economics work. So I would think that this is a good time for a physician to actually do something like this.
Absolutely. I think that the amount of pay, they really kind of decide for themselves. As a locum tenens, you're paid for the work that you do. So you're taking weekend call, working overtime, you are paid. We've actually got physicians that make as much or more than they would in a full-time setting, but they're able to make their own schedule. They're able to work when they want to work.
Yeah, that's a really interesting phenomenon, because if you look at physicians over the course of the years, and I'm sure we have some older doctors listening out there, not exactly the way it worked out. I mean, you can set your own schedule and have a family life. Do you see certain areas of the country that are experiencing more of a need than others?
Sure. I think, the higher population areas at Eastern Seaboard, the Northeast, Southeast, certainly have a large need for physicians. Those would probably be the biggest areas.
Is it inner city or is it all over?
It's all over. It really is all over, quite a bit in inner city, but you've got the Palm Beach that has locum tenens needs as well.
And that's not a bad place to be.
No, it's not.
And so do you see any sort of situations arising where that even in the crisis of a physician shortage where you might even have difficulty placing people?
We typically do not. Very few times do we have an opportunity that we don't have someone that is interested in going.
And anecdotally, if you could tell me, I've heard stories where when the pharmacists have had shortages or nurses, that there are situations where companies will fly in doctors. I mean, are there really situations where doctors will just say, hey, I'll go live in Montana for a couple of months? I mean, does it work out that way? I mean, if you're a physician that wants to do this, is it a sign on for a tour of duty like that?
Yes, definitely. The majority of the positions that we have, we fly a physician, we can fly them from California to New York for a period of even as short as a week or up to, as you said, several months. We do place all over, and we use physicians that are all over. It's not just local.
And do you see any sort of the trend potentially subsiding at all with healthcare reform? I mean, or how long will it take before there is an adequate supply of doctors?
I mentioned before that we continue to put the same number of physicians through medical school every year, and the need is increasing. And with healthcare reform and trying to get more and more people access to healthcare, that the demand will continue to grow. And that's really what staff care has tried to do, is to be able to come in and be able to take someone from California to New York to be able to continue for a facility not just to have to look in their backyard when they have a shortage or when they're in need of a physician.
Well, with that, I would like to thank Jenni Hunter, who's been our guest. She's Divisional Vice President for Staff Care, the largest locum tenens staffing company in the United States. She comes to us from Dallas, Texas. I'm Bruce Japsen of the Chicago Tribune, and I've been your host, and we've been talking about the field of temporary doctors, or locum tenens as the Latin term goes. You've been listening to ReachMD Radio on XM 160, the channel for medical professionals. ReachMD online, on demand, and on the air. Please visit us at reachmd.com, and I'd like to thank you today for listening.